Geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek. Did anybody talk about the Twins episode? I'm John Bonus of Twins Daily. With me here in Gleeman at the Athletic.
I like how you did that. It almost sounded like you forgot your own name. That was good. That'd be a new one for the show. We've forgotten a lot of stuff.
Yeah, well.
I'm, give me some help here. What was the name of the podcast host you had for many years? I
was walking around with Chrissy yesterday, and like almost in consecutive, like twice in the same sentence, I had to say something where I mess it up every time, like Chris Parmalee. It was that sort of thing where it doesn't matter what it
Juan
is.
Miranda. And who's the latest one? Castro.
Because there's a building over here called SPS building, and I call it SRS building every time. Okay. And then there was, I don't know, something else, and she's just like,
yeah, she's used to it. I mean, I'm used to it.
Right. Yeah, right.
She sometimes. What Becky and I do constantly, and I suspect any couple does this after a while, is when we're watching like a movie or TV show or whatever, one of us will say to the other, "What was that guy in? We just saw him in something." Yes. And then the other one looks it up on IMDb or whatever we spent it. Right. And so sometimes she'll be like, "That guy's name is Joe," and I'll be like, "It's not Joe, it's Dan." And she'll be like, "How do you know that?" And I go, "That's all I do with Bonus on the podcast. He says the guy's name that's sort of correct,
that's all right.
And I have to be ready to kind of fill in the blank."
Yeah, that's true. You do it with actors. I do it with people in our building.
Well, yeah. I avoid that by not talking to anyone in my building. So the Minnesota Twins, red hot once again, 2 in a row.
Look at that.
It's a winning. Is 2 in a row? Would you call 2 in a row a winning streak?
Sure. This year,
is
why
this
not?
What they said in Bull Durham? Or
Three is a streak.
3 is a streak. Yeah.
That's it.
They recover from one of the worst losses of the season. I don't know if it's your signature bad loss that you like to try to identify. The 12-3 or whatever it was in the first Washington game. Yeah, that was pretty bad. Pablo Lopez gives up 7 runs, et cetera, et cetera. They come back and win the next 2 from a pretty bad Washington team, but. Still road series. They'll take the wins. Now
they got a lot of runs in the second game after their team only meeting to discuss the hitting, and then they scored 3 runs in the last one.
Tonight, so we're recording this Friday morning. Tonight, assuming it doesn't continue to rain,
it's not.
It's
going to stop here soon.
Wow.
Trust me, as somebody who's paying a lot of attention to when it rains right now.
John's roof doesn't work anymore. So
we got home from the Twins Daily Watch Party at Brixworth. We'll talk about Brixworth later. And there was not just like a drip coming from our ceiling, like a stream of water coming from our ceiling which is not, I
don't want to say funny, but it's interesting because John lives on like the 200th floor. Like he's so far up that like
I live on the top floor, so when the roof leaks,
but of a huge building, like,
yeah, right.
Yeah, it's funny to me.
Not that huge.
Well, it's 3 times the size of my building, and mine's
27 floors.
Well, don't give it away, John. Now people know where you live. They're going to be waiting in your living room for you when you come home.
I actually think I haven't researched this.
You'd like that if just listeners were in your living room.
But as I look out from the 27th floor on things, there are a lot of 27th floor buildings. And I think there's a lot. And then it jumps to 40, and then it jumps to like 52.
Oh, so for like zoning, it must be.
I don't know if it's for zoning or if it's for how deep you have to put the pylons in, like the overall structures. Well, it seems like there's the height of the cranes that are available.
Our neighborhood couldn't go past 10. I know for a while.
Yeah. Okay.
So it must be something similar. Anyway, Minnesota Twins tonight is the 50th game of the season, which is a little round number thing. And we kind of talked about this on the last Patreon, just the up and down nature, or maybe on this episode last week. But they're on pace for 86 wins right now,
right,
through 49 games, which is almost precisely what their over-under and their projection and our personal, I think one of us picked them for 86, one picked them for 87.
That might be right, yeah.
Something like that. And yet, at no point have they really played like an 86-win team.
Right.
They've either played like a 50-win team or a 110-win team.
That's right.
Or more than that even. And so it's been weird, and I think the vibe of the first 49 games as we come up on the 50th tonight against the Texas Rangers, who are also who are struggling. They're below 500. They just got swept by
the Phillies.
Phillies, yeah. Although the Phillies are sweeping everyone.
I know.
It's absurd. Our Phillies writer, Matt Gelb, who I think does a really good job for The Athletic, his tweets at this point are like, yeah, they won again. I don't know.
Chrissy just says the Phillies are Phillying again.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just crushing their
people.
opponent.
Yeah, it's really incredible. How horrible that must be. Because what do you even talk about? Just kidding. But, if you'd have told somebody coming into the season they're going to be coming up on the 50-game mark and they're going to be on pace for 86 wins, I would have said, okay, that seems fine.
Especially if you mentioned Royce Lewis has been out for the whole time.
Yeah, they've had some problems within that. But I think I'd say, well, how many are they up in the division? Probably.
Right, yeah.
Or, is any other team above 500? Or, the expectations for this division coming in were pretty damn low, based, I think, rightly on last season. But I think they're, what are they, six games back? Six and a half of Cleveland and 5.5, I think, of the Royals, who they're about to see here at the end of the homestand. Right. So they got to keep winning. I think, they're well positioned for a playoff spot as it stands now, obviously. But we saw last year, you don't want to be on the Blue Jays end of that matchup where you have to go on the road to play 2 out of 3. Winning the Central still carries incredible value. Not only just you want a couple of home games, you don't want to go on the road for your whole playoff lives, basically. Right. But I don't know. It's been such a strange, you start 7-13, you go 17-3, you lose 7 in a row, then now you win 2 in a row, and it's like I have really no sense of what this team actually is in terms of what is their kind of true talent level. Although I guess just what their record is about 86 wins, which
the truth is I do feel like I've got that both from their starting pitching and kind of from their bullpen, maybe a little less so from their bullpen. I just don't know what this offense is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think I understand the starting pitching pretty well. I think I know what I think has been pretty consistent.
Yeah.
I think the bullpen has been mostly consistent as well. We'll talk about the couple of blips we had here in Washington from the highest of high leverage. But I just don't know what to make of this offense. And,
I think that's right.
Because when they have been hot, it is not the guys I thought that were going to hit that have made it hot. Right? It has been a bunch of coin flips, and it seems like everybody's heads at one time or everybody's tails at one time.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
I
think that's right. It goes with the record. Obviously, they hit 195 through 20 games, and then they scored basically 7 runs a game for a month.
Right.
Well, that's amazing.
They
were the best offense in baseball during that time, and it wasn't. They had a couple big explosion, 10+ run games, but it wasn't 15 runs in a game.
Right.
It was like 6 to 8 runs per game.
That's exactly what you want.
Right. That's exactly what you want if you're distributing runs. It's like those are wins unless your pitching is just horrible. And then of late, we saw it in the Yankees series and then the following series right after that, where they get swept back to back, but against in Cleveland,
where they scored something like 4 meaningful runs the entire 6-game series.
Before the game
that
was
weren't garbage time, right? Yeah.
And they didn't exactly have a huge explosion in Washington other than when they faced Patrick Corbin, who's like a human batting practice machine at this point. But I don't know what to make of it. On the other hand, I think the perception of it is this team is so wildly unpredictable,
Jekyll and Hyde,
and certainly the fact that the most recent stretch was a 7-game losing streak suggests, timed up against the Wolves, where everybody wants to pay attention to the best team in town,
right? Yeah,
is like, oh well, here we go again, and yet, there are much worse places to be at the 50-game mark than an 86-win pace. You could play like this, not have quite the sustained 17-3 run. Like, let's say you just go 10-2 when you're playing well,
right,
and you're below 500 right now, and we have some real questions. They haven't really, as weird as it sounds. They dug the hole initially with 7-13, but as weird as it sounds, you've reached the 50-game mark, and now it's the perception of where they stand is much different because Cleveland and Kansas City are just so much better than anybody expected them to be. Right. But realistically, they've played exactly as well as they did in winning the division pretty easily last year.
Sure.
Or at least that's how it ended up. It wasn't like this at this point. And they're ahead of, I believe, last year's pace. They were below 500 at the All-Star break last year. So, but with that said, the schedule Well, it's tricky because some of the teams, it's like we talked about when they were facing Seattle, Toronto, etc.
Right.
Some of the teams that you would expect, like the defending champions.
Yeah, I was going to say the Astros are coming up here pretty soon.
Well, and the Rangers is what I'm talking
that's
about.
true too.
But the last two champions,
right,
Texas and Houston, are both below 500.
Right.
Although the Astros now have been winning a lot lately.
I know.
So that we should have played them. Should have played them in April.
You're right.
That was a mistake. They should have done that. I don't know why they didn't choose to play them in April. That was a joke. Rangers, which, they're a few games below 500, but they're defending champs. Now, the big difference is all their pitching is injured.
Yeah, right.
They're waiting for all these guys to return, Scherzer, DeGrom, etc., at midseason. So get them while it's good, I guess.
Well, they also lost their playoff MVP last year. Who's the pitcher?
Montgomery?
Montgomery. Jeff Montgomery.
Yeah. No, Jordan Montgomery.
Jeff Montgomery was a Blue Jays reliever.
Close. Royals.
Okay, all right.
Closer.
Bluish.
Sure. God, you're worse than Becky. But with Becky, it's always, we saw that guy on a House episode 4 years ago. Like, what? Now it's you. It's like, I don't even know. Anyway, I'm glad. See, I think I'm losing it.
Oh, my God.
But it always keeps me feeling okay that I still am the one who can fill in the blanks.
Yeah, let's just hang out with the 57-year-old on a more regular basis.
Pretty soon I'm going to have to go to an old folks' home. Now they're the only ones that are worse off.
God.
I'm going to have to go to like the dementia floor of something and be like, anybody want to talk baseball? I can tell you who anybody was compared to you guys. Sorry, that was crap.
I feel the same way about walking, walking or moving around in general. Like I just hang out with you to make myself feel mobile.
Oh my God. I got a couple of funny notes on that. Went to the doctor again. It's a disaster. But so Rangers starting tonight for 3. Then you have the Royals coming to town, which I wouldn't have circled coming into the season as a huge series, but that's a big series too. And then you go at Houston, which I know from the playoffs can be terrorizing. Good barbecue in the press box though, so I'll give them credit for that. At least for the playoffs. I don't know what they do for the regular season. They were carving up brisket and they had rib. It was amazing. I was like, man, I don't want to leave here. And then at Yankees, we know that can be a house of horrors. So, defending champions, the upstart team in the division, the 2 years ago champions that knocked you out of the playoffs last year, and then the team that you never ever want to play under any circumstances, the Yankees. I'm not saying that's the toughest 4-series stretch of all time because 2 of those teams are below 500, but that ain't an easy 4-game stretch. And so I think if you can clear that, if you can go 500-ish during that, then it really lightens up quite a bit. Then you get the Pittsburghs and the Oaklands and teams like that kind of.
The first weekend of June, they get to play at Pittsburgh, and that is. I'll just tell anybody if you're looking for someplace to go early in the summer to take a long weekend someplace, go see PNC Ballpark in Pittsburgh. It is gorgeous.
You stay in the city for one day, John. That's your challenge.
I will actually be in London that weekend. I will not be.
You failed the challenge.
I will not be able to make it.
Unbelievable.
Nick Nelson and friends, I think, are going to Pittsburgh. So
okay, that doesn't do me any good. Okay. So yeah, that's kind of the reset of where they're at the coming up on the 1/3 mark will be midway through the Royals series of the season, basically.
That's right.
Which, is it more meaningful? No, but it's
Memorial Day, actually. The day after Memorial Day.
Okay.
Memorial Day would be the 1/3 mark.
It's a decent point always to just kind of take stock of where things are.
It's kind of the cliche right now. Right?
Yeah. Which I think is fair. I mean, you're still basically 2 months out from the trade deadline. We do a lot of stuff about the trade deadline, but we're not going to do it until July 1st, certainly. So,
although this year, who knows?
Why?
Just because there's actually trades being made from teams that are falling out of the race, which we've not seen. Yeah,
that was a weird one. A couple things from Washington, the series in Washington. The Stephen Okert took the bullpen cart. Was that the second game? Yeah, second game.
Okay. I thought it was the third game, but keep going.
Whatever.
It was the day game.
One of the wins.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Took the bullpen cart in, and apparently he's the first person to use the bullpen cart this season in Washington.
Okay.
which is funny to me that they still make it available. Like, what if nobody's taking it? Who is somebody just sitting in it all day and just like they don't even have like their pants on?
Leave the key there.
Yeah. Well, so somebody drove him. I'm assuming somebody from the grounds crew or something drives the bullpen cart, and it looked to me in real time. I was watching it, so he pulls up on the baseline or whatever, and let him out, and it looked like he was just kind of giving the guy a handshake, like a thank you. But then he handed him something. I'm like, what? He handed him a $5 bill,
a tip.
And he told the reporters in Washington afterward, "Oh yeah, I've been carrying it around like since last season when I was with the Marlins." Because I wanted to use the bullpen card, and I just never got called into a game where I could have used it. And so it's like, yeah, well, a $5 tip for about a 1 block ride is pretty good. I think,
good, yeah.
As far as Ubers go,
that's hilarious.
I missed the.
I thought it was the best.
I remember Perkins.
I did want to. I was glad people unpacked that a little bit.
Yeah, Okert is a real interesting guy. Like he's very outgoing and funny, and has an interesting background. I think he's from Texas. They got a lot of guys like that. I mean, the relievers are always like that. Like if you just have to sight unseen enter a major league clubhouse and go talk to a player, pick a reliever.
Sure, of course.
Like if you know nothing about anyone, pick a middle reliever because they got a lot of time on their hands. They're usually kind of weird.
If they're not, if they're
in a good way,
right? If they were not extroverts before sitting in the bullpen with a bunch of extroverts, they're going to be extroverts by the time they're done sitting in the bullpen.
Got nothing to do out there, honestly. Like. I remember asking sometimes, talking to like Tyler Duffy in years past, like, what do you guys do out there? And he's just like, we BS for like 5 innings, and then people start to go, all right, I got to stretch out. I got to see if I might have to go to work tonight or something like that. It's like, okay. And then the other thing, bullpen-wise, not as fun, is that the stuff we've been talking about the last couple episodes with Duran seems to be getting worse rather than better. And I don't even mean giving up the homers, although obviously that's an issue. But his velocity was lower than ever yesterday or 2 days ago. And again, I feel the need to preface this every single time we talk about it because I can just see the people tweeting angrily at me. That's what I see at all times in my brain. But
it is really,
it sounds absurd to be like, oh my God, he was only throwing 98, 99, 100. And yeah, if he was just anyone, that would be absurd.
That's it, yes.
But he's a guy who throws 103, 104 when he's really going well. And even when he's not, tip-top velocity, last year he averaged like a shade under 102, which was the highest average fastball velocity in baseball. Well, now he's just barely over 100 on that. And look, a guy throwing, 101.3 or 100.3 on average. I just switched it from KWB to KFAN. That's interesting. But I think it is 100.3. They should use it as a sponsorship opportunity while it lasts. Is not a worry except for if he threw 102 last year. And we talked about this. We've talked about this with other pitchers too, like Jay Jackson, who has been DFA'd.
Yeah.
And the Twins are waiting to see if he clears waivers so they can keep him, which I suspect will happen, but we'll see. We'll probably find that out tomorrow, maybe. Jay Jackson's fastball velocity went from like 93 last year to 91 this year. Right. Well, that's a big deal. But
that's a bigger deal than somebody going from 100 to 100. Well, in terms of effectiveness, it's a bigger deal than from somebody going from 101 to 99. But in terms of
what it means for the team,
yeah, right.
You just drop Jay Jackson, and then you don't have to worry about his velocity anymore. He was
never going to be a high leverage guy to begin with. I mean, really, the scary part isn't so much like, is he that much less effective? I mean, he is. We're kind of seeing it, right? But the scary part is like,
why is this happening?
What's going on? What you worry about, like a lot of things, you worry about the trend, not exactly where he is. 199, just a lot of guys can make a living on a 99-mile-an-hour fastball, but you're worried about the fact that it seems to keep going down.
Well, I mean, he can be a really good reliever throwing 100 instead of 102, 103. But yeah, the question I have, I mean, no reliever would choose to do this, intentionally.
Right.
There's no, it's not like he went from throwing 4-seam fastballs to 2-seam fastballs. Sometimes you might lose a little bit of velocity there and you exchange it for movement, or it's not like he's trying to throw a cutter instead of a fastball. I mean, those are things where you go, all right, well, he's not going to have as much velocity as he used to, but they feel it's worth. Well, this is just a guy throwing the same 3 pitches he always has. And the one that used to be 102 to 104 is now 99 to 101. And, he's been relatively effective until these last couple where he gave up a homer. But yeah, my worry, and he was asked about, and Baldelli has been. We asked Baldelli about it back on the homestand, so we'll ask him about it tonight, I'm sure. From a health perspective, and everyone seems to think he's healthy, but there's a few things looking at like the underlying, like the deep dive metrics and stuff, not just stuff like velocity or strikeout rate or stuff, but like extension.
Right.
It's clear something is off with him, I would guess mechanically. So then the question becomes, is that just, sometimes pitchers get out of whack mechanically, or is this mechanic change the result of him trying to compensate for something physically up with him? Right. And when a guy misses, 6 weeks with an oblique strain and then comes back and at no point is, even before that in spring training, has been throwing peak velocity, you say, well, is his oblique still bothering him, or is he compensating for something, trying to shorten up his release point or whatever? Because if you look, so extension just means basically where is the ball being released relative to the mound or relative to the plate. You can look at either way. Sure. And so like Bailey Ober has a much more extension than who's a little tiny pitcher. I don't know.
Sergio
Romo. There's a good one. Thank you. See, look at you. You're filling in the blanks too. It would have been funny if you'd be like, his name was not Tony Romo.
Luke Van Mill.
Yeah.
Tony Romo would have been a better one. You're right. Yeah, that's right.
Let's re-record
Sergio
Garcia. But that's a fairly simple concept. Is like a taller guy in certain arm slots or certain deliveries you can kind of create extra extension, which can then the goal of that is the ball gets on the hitter quicker.
Sure.
So if you're throwing 92 and you're a short guy who short arms the ball, it might actually kind of effectively be 91 or 90. Right. But if you're a 6'10" and you release the ball with the opposite of a short arm, a long arm, I guess, you might be able to add a mile or two to your velocity. And so with Duran, it's minor. It's like a couple of inches difference, but it's on all three pitches relative to last year. So that tells me he's, for whatever reason, not getting sort of the full extension, the full uncoiling of his body mechanically. So I would be curious why that is. Like just, it hasn't like crashed or anything, but that's something to watch. And then within that, it's getting fewer ground balls, which he was a ground ball machine. That's what made him so amazing, was that not only did he get tons of strikeouts, but the balls in play were pounded into the ground from all three pitches, really, but especially, the splinter, obviously, but getting a lot fewer grounders. And, this seems simplistic, but ground balls are never hit over the fence. So you can't give up home runs when you're getting ground balls. And then they're pulling the ball a lot more from him against him than they ever did before. And I think that one you can just trace to the velocity. Like it's just a lot easier to pull 99 than it is 103. Just in general. And, I think within that, the fastball itself is not getting fewer swings and misses than it did before, like as a percentage of swings against it. Right. It's just getting hit harder when it does get hit. And then the curveball and the splitter are getting fewer swings and misses, which goes to our longstanding theory that we've both kind of talked about, which is those are both amazing pitches on their own. And I think at times you can make the argument that his fastball is actually his third best pitch. But those pitches are also reliant on his fastball. Right. His dropping an 88-mile-an-hour curveball on a hitter is much more effective.
If they aren't looking for an 88-mile-per-hour curveball.
Right. If they're looking for gearing up for 102, 103. And, all pitches to some extent are linked together like that. I mean, you can also say that his fastball is more effective because they have to keep an eye out for an off-speed pitch instead of him being like a one-pitch just fastball guy. But, so those are the things I would watch. I mean, he's not getting clobbered. He's not getting knocked around. He's given up a couple of homers. He recovered, obviously. Yes. Had a runner on second base, and he got out of it to get the save there. Yep. But this is really the one role. I guess starting pitcher is kind of like that too, where you can't really fake it as a closer. Right. You can't really just get by with a so-so outing, because often allowing one run and certainly allowing two runs will change the game on you. And so, if you're a middle reliever, Jay Jackson, for instance, and your velocity's down and you're struggling, well, they're going to use you for the most part in spots where it doesn't really matter if you're good or bad. Like, obviously, they'd like you to be good, but if you're bad, it just goes from a blowout to a worse blowout.
Right.
But Duran, at least so far, they're still using him roughly in the same way, either the 8th or the 9th inning of games they lead or are tied in. And I don't know. I mean, we've seen this with closers before. It's just very difficult. If you're not on top of your game as a closer, it can become trouble right away, and it can wipe away, 8.5 innings of good for a team, which becomes problematic. Now, maybe we're overreacting to just a couple of bad outings for him, but I think but
it's not just a couple of bad outings, right? There's you can take a look at the underlying stuff like velocity, et cetera, and say
the bad outings came after this was a discussion point.
Right, that's right.
Initially, when he came off the IL, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, basically, and we were like, "Boy, it's weird." Even in spring training, he wasn't throwing that, but at that time, he said, "Well, I'm ramping up. I had a whole offseason." It's like, okay, some pitchers do that. I mean, that used to be very common. I remember Joe Nathan used to show up throwing 86, and everyone would freak out, and then a month later, he was throwing 94, and he was fine. But at no point since the last pitch he threw in Houston, or actually here, I guess, in the playoffs.
Right.
Has he been kind of normal for what we've come to expect from Duran? And initially, he had a 0 ERA despite that. And he was getting strikeouts. He was throwing strikes. He wasn't giving up much hard contact. And it was like, okay, well, as long as he's rolling along, I guess we'll just keep this on the kind of back burner as a topic or you can't get that worried about
something
it.
to keep an eye on, right?
And then he starts to give up a couple of home runs, 2-3 homers, and it's like, ooh, okay. So I'll be curious about this. I'm curious to see. They know all this. They're aware of all this stuff from a mechanical standpoint. I mean, they got guys who just look at every pitch in real time and spotlight this stuff as soon as it comes up. So I'll be curious to see if the extension and some of these other metrics kind of trend back towards his norms over his next 2 or 3 appearances, which are going to be during this homestand probably. And then within that, just is he going to continue to be used as a closer, or would they have him take a step back? I don't think they would. I mean, look. That's the what feels weird about this type of discussion about a pitcher like Duran is even if you said to me, well, we don't know the reason, but guess what? He throws 99 now instead of 103. Well, he's still probably their best pitcher.
Sure. I mean, it's not so much, especially with Baldelli managing, it's not so much about, whether or not somebody is such and such the closer. "Quote unquote," the closer right now, right?
Right. It's just high leverage versus.
Yeah. Where do you trust them and where don't you trust them? And I wouldn't be shocked if, say, Brock Stewart comes back. We'll find out probably more about that today.
Right.
If we find him being in high, we say like, it feels like the higher leverage role here has been Brock Stewart has been put into it, as opposed to even if you still see Duran as closer, maybe Brock. Right. When Duran came back, he wasn't immediately closing a lot of the times. He was sometimes pitching the 8th inning or the 7th inning. In fact, the game
but those were higher leverage.
The game he blew in. Right. The first part of the series was in the 8th inning.
But that wasn't because they were dialing him back. That was because they thought that was the most important part of the game.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
They thought that was the most important. It would be interesting to see, like, them dialing him back really means, no, he's now just going to close. Right? Like, we're just going to keep him for the ninth so he's prepared, so he can warm up, so maybe he can get that extra. Right. We don't have to call on him to come in quickly, something like that. He knows where he's going to be. We know when we can use him, something like that. It might be that's how they dial
I will
back.
say he never comes in now. I don't think he has this season in something other than a clean inning.
Yeah, that's true.
So he's getting plenty of time to.
Yeah, that's true.
The stadium ops department has plenty of time to queue up the intro and all that stuff.
That's right.
Can you imagine when we started this podcast 12 years ago? If I said, we're going to be doing an episode where we're freaked out about a guy who only averages 100 miles an hour with his fastball.
Yeah, I know.
You go like, what? On what planet? The Twins had trouble getting guys who threw 93.
What year did Kyle Gibson first appear as a Twin? Was it 2014? And that was like 3 years into the podcast, right?
Probably before that. But yeah.
I'd like to take a look.
People were excited about him because he threw 93.
Because I remember I was joking, that first digit on the speed chart, that's a 9, people.
Yeah.
like that,
so you laugh,
that was where things were.
We, at the end of the Terry Ryan regime in like 2015, 16, when they were terrible, they were trying to add quote unquote velocity by like getting crappy, hard-throwing relievers included in trades like Jim Hoey, or just claiming, Lester Oliveros off waivers because they were so unable to develop velocity or even draft guys who had velocity that they tried to kind of shortcut it and say, well, who are like the fungible, readily available guys we can add who already throw really hard? But the problem with those guys is anybody who's readily available who at that time threw, the upper echelon, which was like 96 back then.
Right.
Well, they're terrible.
Right. Yeah.
And they also, the Twins had no plan for like, what can we fix with them? They were just like, oh, this guy throws hard. You guys wanted velocity. Here you go. Here's Lester Oliveros. And it was like,
Jim
no.
Hoey.
Yeah. So back then,
Yep.
I mean, this sounds like Grandpa Gleeman. This was only 10 plus years ago, but back then 95 was hard.
Yeah.
And now, honestly, I should have looked this up, but like, it wouldn't surprise me if the average relief pitcher throws 95 now. Certainly, if you were to look at the average high leverage reliever, like the average guy who appears in spots that matter, I'll guarantee they throw higher than 95 miles an hour. I mean, every team, we see it. The Twins have it. I mean, if you would have dropped Griffin Jacks into the 2015 Twins,
Right.
people would have been going absolutely bonkers for this guy. They'd be like, this guy, he would have had the best stuff of any reliever ever. And now he's like, hey, he's fourth on the
starter. Well, even as a starter, he might have been that one. Like he was throwing 93, 94 as a starter.
Except it was leaving at 115.
Well, that's true. Well, that's the difference between 2013 and 2024.
Before we get to some other stuff with the Twins, let's talk about Brixworth.
Giddy up.
John, you just did a Twins Daily meetup there.
Goodness. And it was a hit. It was a huge hit.
Yeah.
The food is so good.
Yeah,
First of all,
they got pizza. It's Detroit style pizza.
Detroit-style pizza. And then apparently Dana Wessel turned me on to the wings. I'd never had the wings there. Okay. I ate 2 orders of wings.
I believe that. Story checks out.
One was Buffalo and one was Cool Ranch. And boy, they were both good. It was really good.
And then also beer.
Also, they've got great beers. Such good beers that they got such good beers that we had a local beer connoisseur, I'll say, come there and say, like, you've got to have this one. Like, you've got to get this one. And also Phil Miller shows up and he's like, and Phil, you've got to have this one too.
All the people you hang out with could be described as local beer connoisseurs. But anyway, I got a couple texts from a couple of drunk local beer connoisseurs during that.
You did. Yeah. They had 11 different TVs on. They've also got that great outdoor deck. It's the perfect place to go before a Twins game. It's where
Darby's used to be.
Right.
Which has a good outdoor space, and it's right by Target Field.
Yeah, it's like a block south of Target Field.
Yeah.
A block and a half.
Perfect pre- or post-game spot.
Right.
But also good enough food that you could just go there for dinner.
Right.
So
there's one in Burnsville. Don't go to that. Well, go to that one if you're in Burnsville. But if you're going to a game, go to the one
North
in North Loop.
Yeah.
Just look it up. Brixworth. It's easy to find.
Block from Gate 6 at Target Field. You just Google Brixworth beer, and you probably, if you go there 3 times, you'll run into John. That's like odds.
All those sizes, or join them at their Great Burnsville location to watch the games on TV. And then while you're at Brixworth, you can easily get tickets to the game.
Use the Game Time app.
Using the Game Time
We've talked a lot about the Game Time app. John's routine basically is to
meet people.
Eat.
I have
drink,
tickets to most games. I have tickets to most games, but then we'll go with like a friend. Meet some friends. I mean, like
good
anybody not have a game, everybody not have a ticket. We'll just
well,
you grab
walk
one
there.
from the Game Time app.
You punch up the Game Time app. It's an app, not a website. Game Time, and they specialize in hard to find tickets, not just for sporting events, but for like concerts and shows and stuff like that. But they also specialize in last minute tickets.
Right.
And that can honestly be
Wolves games.
You get, that's true. But for Twins, it's perfect. If you're at Brixworth or you're at somewhere on a bar stool somewhere, 20 minutes before the game, you get up, you start making the walk over to gate whatever you're going in. As you're walking, keep your eye on the road. But as you're walking, punch up Game Time app, you can get tickets. And then also the thing that is helpful with them is they kind of have it set up so they'll show you the best value that you can get.
Right.
Like if you're not too familiar about what section is this or are these decent seats for the price, they can kind of tell you relative to the price, these are good value, these are not good value.
And we'll also say, I mean, even relative to the price that this team offers right now, you can get good options on the Game Time app, and we'll explain why in a little bit. But for now, what you need to know is that you can take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. You just download the Game Time app, so it's not really a website. It's an app. Go download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Gleeman for $20 off your first purchase. $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code, spell out Gleeman, Gleeman, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And Aaron, you want to talk a little bit about why those tickets are a little bit cheaper right now? Why?
Well, I was going to say this for the end, but sure. Because by the end, I figured Dave St. Peter won't be listening. That was a joke, Dave. Hi, Dave. That was a joke. I'll see you later. No, I may have joked too much about that. Because now we get like mailbag questions is like, do you need security when you go to the games now? Like, no, just joking. Here's how you know it's not that serious.
Right.
I'm joking about it. If I was really being accosted by Twins employees every time we offered a criticism of the television deal or the whatever, I probably wouldn't be talking about it that much. But like if I was,
I'll give them some credit.
Okay.
Today, after the Twins game ends, first of all, they moved the game forward an hour to try and avoid the Wolves game and the Wolves.
Right.
I have it on good authority that they are keeping open after the game ends. Most of their bars are going to be open, and they have the Wolves game on, so you can stick around and watch the Wolves until the end of that game. So they're going to keep not just the truly on deck option, but keep the pumps on. And on top of that, they didn't really want to announce that because they didn't want to interfere with the Wolves block parties and stuff that they've got going on. But if you are going to the game tonight, I think you'll be able to stick around there, watch the game.
So you're revealing information that they didn't want to announce. Well, so maybe you need security.
Maybe I do. Maybe it was supposed to be embargoed. I don't know. But I've already seen it on Twitter from a couple different folks.
You can't embargo alcohol-related things from John Bonus. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's impossible.
I've got my sources. Yeah,
it's true. John always. I remember when St. Peter used to come on the show. This was a decade ago. He would always come on for the Meltdown. He'd be one of our guests, and John would always like question would be like a court of law where he's like, "Is it true that you guys are adding another beer stand in left field?" And it's like John had so many beer-related sources and like rumors and yeah.
Well, and eventually we did get him to the point where he's like. I think this was an exact quote. It was like, listen, Budweiser writes us a big check every year.
Yeah. Which is still true, right? That's still
course,
their primary beer.
Of course.
Yeah, so I looked up, I was curious, once they went on the road, I started checking out the attendance numbers. Because it's been decent lately, but, and they just had a Yankee series. They've had some good opponents, like Red Sox, Yankees, like that draw pretty well. So I thought it was a fair time to kind of look at it. And Baseball Reference will allow you to compare year over year or through this many home dates, basically. Yeah. And they're down like 350 tickets a game or, tickets sold per game, basically.
Which isn't a lot, but...
No, it's like, 1% or whatever. But what makes that interesting, you normally would just say, okay, it's just neutral year to year, which it is. Except
they're supposed to be up.
Right. I mean, they won the division last year and advanced in the playoffs, whereas the year before that, they did the opposite. Right. And
this was the time to make I will tell you, as somebody who just bought Timberwolves season tickets for next year, this is when teams sell season tickets.
Exactly.
Right.
We talked about that on the show, right? They called in the middle of the podcast.
if you done a part of the Patreon.
And they got $1,000 out of John while I was sitting there laughing. John's like, what? That's the price per ticket? What? All right, I'll take 2. And the lady's like, we got another one. Anyway, I would have done the same. But yeah, so I mean, even I remember at the media luncheon, Thursday of Twins Fest?
Yeah.
Friday of Twins Fest, I guess?
Yeah.
St. Peter said, quotably, publicly, they were expecting 2.3 million, or they were hoping for 2.3 million fans. Well, they ain't going to get to 2.3 million fans. I mean, they were at 1.9 something last year, and they're slightly under that pace. Now, maybe the raw totals pick up, but you're still going to need to get ahead of last year's pace at some point by 10%, 20%.
Here's the thing about ticket sales. And I've heard this from people within the Twins organization who are responsible for ticket sales.
Right. God love them. They got a tough job sometimes.
85% of the tickets are sold before the season begins.
Season tickets and then just group outings.
That's right. So you've got a pretty good idea. And I mean, actually, if you walk in the door at Target Field, you can ask like one of the ushers or one of the vendors, like, how many are they expecting? They all know how many they're expecting that day. Well, we're expecting 14,000 today, but 20,000 tomorrow.
Right. Because other than strictly walk-up, which they would love to get a huge walk-up number.
It's just a tiny percentage of their total overall numbers.
Yeah, I think the perception of that is maybe wrong. So, yeah, I mean, their season ticket base has eroded over the years to the point that you kind of know what you're capped at. Now, certainly if they were in first place right now and thriving, you're going to get a lot more walk-up. You're going to get people signing up for mid-season tickets and all that stuff.
And certainly the Wolves being the focal point of attention is probably something that's hurting them a little bit. Certainly the TV situation is hurting them. The off-season hurt them. I mean, they've done plenty of ways to shoot themselves in the foot before this Wolves thing came along.
They've shot themselves in the foot a lot. Other people have shot them in the foot a lot. They've stepped on nails a lot.
They've partnered with people who like to shoot them in the foot a lot.
There's a lot of foot shooting. They got to be the league leaders in foot shooting. The foot shooting league leader. Maybe there's the title for the episode. Foot shooting 101.
I love that.
So in some ways, I don't know. Because we've also talked about season tickets or just ticket sales in general. They're on like a 1-year delay, basically. And the reason we've talked about that in the past is, a team's bad for 5 years, and then all of a sudden they get good for a year in the first half, and the newspaper columnists are always like, "What kind of fan base is this? They're still only getting."
I love that story every year. Yeah.
Right, it happens every time.
Right. Yeah.
But the reality is what you said earlier, which is 80% or more, or whatever it is, of every team's tickets are sold during the off season.
In statistics, we call that a lagging indicator.
Right.
The attendance is behind the actual ability of the team to provide entertainment.
Now, if you succeed within the season for months at a time, you make it to the All-Star break, you're in first place, all that stuff, you start to see the playoffs ahead. Well, yeah, then attendance rises.
Sure.
But it's still going to pale in comparison to just sort of what was the vibe attendance-wise or fan base-wise from, October through January. That's when you're really making or not your money and your ticket sales. And so part of me thinks, well, okay, the lag effect is in their favor this year. Because I would argue last season, not from a pure wins and losses standpoint, but I would argue last season was the most successful Twins season in 20 years. And it was certainly no worse than the second most successful, I would argue, behind 2019.
Right.
And 2019, they didn't get the lag effect because 2020 was the COVID season. So they didn't benefit from that. They lost money on that. So, yeah, on one hand, you would say, well, they should have been doing – business should be booming.
Right.
I mean, they won the division. They won a playoff series. People might want to see more playoff games at Target Field. So you should have, from the lagging indicator standpoint, you should get the boost for this year that maybe people would have perceived down the stretch last year. Their attendance was fine down the stretch last year. But then the other half of that is what you talked about, which was, the lag effect has to be uninterrupted.
Right. That's right.
You can't be shooting yourselves in the foot and expect the same positive lag effect.
Yeah.
And so that was really what happened, which is the normal push you would get from the success of last season. And we talked about it more from like just a pure morale standpoint. But morale translate, it's some combination of winning and morale translates to ticket sales. Once you're past the first handful of years at a new ballpark, which kind of sells itself. Well, so if you're lowering the morale, you're lowering the ticket, interest or the level of, supply and demand aspect of it. But then also it's not even so much that you lowered it. It's that you kind of put a stop sign up for the normal lag effect that you would get from a successful season. They would have been better off just saying nothing and doing nothing.
Right.
Now, people would still be mad because it was like, wait, it's opening day and they're down 34 million. Nobody said that. But they probably would have sold a few more tickets at some point. Right. And so all of that adds up to, again, 350 a game down. That could change tonight. I mean, they outperformed the 50th game of the season tonight or whatever. But in general,
they're not going to. Just
for tonight.
I don't know. Maybe we'll
Friday
see.
Night, I don't know. But just in general, I mean, they were expecting roughly a 20% gain year over year in raw ticket sales.
Right.
Well, we're a third of the way through the season and they're down slightly. You're not going to have anything close to that. So, unfortunately, now some people might be sitting there and saying, good, rightfully so.
Yeah, well,
and I wouldn't argue with that, but here's the problem.
Here's the thing. Like when you as a organization, save pocket $30 million that you're not going to spend on payroll and then get a TV deal and pocket those tens of millions of dollars. Turns out all that money doesn't just come free. You also lose some revenue as part of that.
Your decisions have consequences.
Right.
That's a big thing with me.
You can lose, a percentage of, attendance. You can lose a percentage of sponsors. I mean, this is this sort of performance or these factors, we talked a little bit about how the TV deal could affect their long-term future, like their long-term fan base, right? But it also affects things like sponsors who thought they were going to get, their TV, their logo, their ads on a bunch
to
of
a full audience,
right? Or they thought that we had a question on the Patreon last week about, hey, how come the Twins don't have any of the uniform deals that some of the other ones have, where they've got a patch on their shoulder? Well,
because what are they really offering? For that? Nothing.
Right.
But yeah, and so the problem is, well, that's what you just said is why we argued throughout the offseason that if ever there was a time to take a bigger monetary loss in the short term, it's now, because at least if you were to keep the payroll at its roughly 150 plus level, it's not going to be amazing. You still are essentially lowering it in terms of inflation, but it would at least allow that full morale lag effect to take place. Yeah. And then you can reassess your situation. And
or allow people to stream, or allow people to have the shows on Comcast, or allow people to have,
But so here's the problem if you're a fan. And look, if you don't like the product, don't pay money for it.
Right.
Fans are doing that.
Yeah, that's right.
And I don't want to make too much of it. I mean, it's basically the same attendance as last year. But here's, from a fan standpoint, the only thing that's going to come of that, unfortunately, it would be amazing if that sort of spurred the Twins to go, we got to ramp up spending and we got to get a new great TV deal and blah, blah, blah. Well, no, they're not going to do that.
Exactly
Instead, what's going to happen is if they don't hit 2.3 million or even 2 million, which they're not on pace for even, well, payroll's going to go down even further. Right. And then it becomes just sort of a never-ending cycle. So I don't know. It's I will forever be the last person in the entire world to criticize or scold or even find fault with a fan base not buying tickets, because that is 100% on the product being offered.
That's right.
You get what you deserve in terms of audience. It's true of podcasts. It's true of radio shows, television shows, baseball teams. If you're not happy with how many people want to pay to watch your product, make a better product or do a better job reaching those people or marketing that product. And so you will be I will never for 1 second, I've never for 1 second looked out at a bad crowd and went, man, the fans stink.
Right.
No, they're not being compelled to buy this product.
Yes.
And
this market is suddenly becoming kind of competitive in the sports arena. Right. Yeah.
But there is a consequence to it, which is if their attendance doesn't meet what they had expected, that's going to be even more motivation for them to lower payroll. And as we've seen, they don't need that much motivation to lower payroll, unfortunately.
That's right. If you want more on the 2025 payroll and what it means, or what a right-sized payroll means for the 2025 season, I did write a story about that back in spring training when the words right-sized came out, were muttered by Joe Polad on WCCO, and we talked a little bit about what that meant for 2024. I've also got a story back. It's called something like "What does a right-sized payroll mean for the Twins in the future?" Go look that up, because it's not great. It's a bad. Right. People start getting expensive if they keep this payroll at about this level.
I just think of how long and the circumstances involved that were required for them to dramatically increase their payroll in the first place.
Right.
To go from, the 25 range out of 30 teams to the 18 range out of 30 teams. It took a half decade of being the worst team in the league. It took your long-time 2-decade front office getting fired and replaced with a new regime. And then it even had to ramp up from there to where you had to be successful, and the new regime had to push for, maximum spending, which Falvey has done much more so than Terry Ryan. And then that only lasted like 4 years. Right. And now it's back. And it will not take that same level of push for them to lower or at least maintain this lower payroll. I mean, that's going to be sort of the default now. They're going to need motivation to raise it again, and I just don't know what that's going to come from. But
as you say, to finish the talk on attendance, I would still recommend you go to a Twins game. Like, we're not discouraging people from going to a Twins game. I'm going to the game tonight. I'm probably going to all 3-day games this weekend. It's a fun time to go to a Twins game, and they are, in fact, a pretty good team.
Right.
And they're going to be facing the world champions. And then the Royals are coming to town. They get to put the Royals in their place.
Look, we both went to a lot of Twins games when they genuinely sucked.
Well, that's true.
So, yeah, I mean, it's...
We might not be the most objective people when it comes to our views on that, but...
True. That's true.
It's a great place to go.
Yeah, well, and I mean, a lot. What makes this a uncomfortable conversation that we keep having is that the players themselves are not to blame, and really the front office for the most part is not to blame. It's the ownership and circumstances and the television situation and all that. But it's like, well, we're talking about the attendance is neutral or down a little bit, and they're not going to hit their goals and blah blah blah. And meanwhile, they're on pace for exactly what everyone would have projected them to be on pace for. We mentioned Jay Jackson. If you want a lot more on like Jay Jackson and kind of what comes next for the bullpen, or what a month from now the bullpen might look like, we talked a lot about that on the last Patreon episode at the very beginning of the episode. Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. We've been doing basically 2 Patreon episodes a week exclusively for supporters on there that you can get.
I don't know if we'll do 2 next week. We got to talk about that.
But we definitely do 1 a week and usually 2 a week, in addition to this free one that you're listening to now.
You almost always get a recap of the weekend series on your Monday morning for you to listen to, which is always kind of fun.
But yeah, bullpen-wise, they called up Caleb Bosley. He pitched long relief and gave up a few runs or whatever. That's fine. They just needed someone to eat innings, which Jay Jackson wasn't really well suited for.
His primary, he's a decent pitcher who's got options. So that's why he was one of the guys that was called up.
Who?
Bosley. Yeah.
I mean, ideally, you would like to, given this overall state of their bullpen, without Brock Stewart and with Duran struggling maybe, you'd like to be able to call up someone that you could actually pitch in, the 6th inning of a close game.
Sure.
That might be Jorge Alcala, who they seem to have soured on, obviously. And you look at the rest of the AAA, unless you want to give up on Louis Varland as a starter, which he's working on a lot of stuff and having some promising outings in St. Paul, working on throwing his changeup more, switching up some of the pitch mix stuff. They clearly don't want to give up on that yet. They want to see that through and see if he can kind of come out the other side looking much better as a starter. You look at the rest. I mean, they got some veterans down there. Diego Castillo had some success with the Rays early in his career and with Seattle, I think. Ryan Jensen's a guy who's looked pretty good changeup. Ronnie Henriquez, we've seen occasionally get called up. He's pitched pretty well at AAA. The guy who's probably pitched the best at AAA as a reliever is Jordan Balazovic, which, I don't know what they're going to do about that. But there isn't like a...
Balazovic is somebody who, if you call him up, you've got to put him on the 40-man roster.
Well, yeah,
right?
so is
Castillo, he doesn't have options.
And Jensen and et cetera. But if you call him up and he stinks, you can probably not worry about him getting claimed again. He went unclaimed the last time. But
true.
So, there isn't like a... you'd love to have somebody at AAA from a relief standpoint. Like I remember when way back in the day, Pat Neshek was putting up amazing numbers and people were just waiting for him to get called up. And then he got called up and he was really good for the Twins for 3 or 4 years, whatever it was. There isn't really like the notion of a reliever prospect is sort of non-existent in the first place. It's very rare for a guy to get like drafted as a reliever, make his way to the course. It's usually this guy's a starter. Oh, he can't start, can't stay healthy, can't whatever. We make him a reliever, and so a lot of those guys I described fit that description. So it's more about journeymen or veterans or converted starters and just who's pitching the best at AAA. They have some guys who have been okay at AAA, but there isn't one guy other than I would make the case for Alcala. But there isn't one guy you would go, they got to give this guy a shot. Why are they not giving this guy a shot? It would be more, just trying to kind of cycle through some veteran options. And we've seen some of those guys stick and hit in years past. Well, I just, it again goes back to the value of having someone to eat innings. Sounds great, but from an impact standpoint, a wins and losses standpoint, having someone who can actually pitch and get outs that matter is much bigger than that. And I think they're just sort of short on that in general.
I mean, I'll throw out lots of other little things that could happen here, right? One of the reasons you guys should probably subscribe to the Patreon is because on Monday morning, often the homestands begin on a Friday, and then we get a bunch of injury updates on Friday, and we talk about them on Monday morning. So we're going to get an injury update on Brock Stewart, right? Yeah. We're going to, which is a difference. We can also see guys from the back end of the bullpen end up, elevating themselves. We thought we were watching that with Cole Sands earlier this year. We're not necessarily seeing as much of that right now, but that can also just be him facing a workload that he hasn't been entirely comfortable with up to this point and adjusting. You've also got, potential starters down there that could do that. One of the ones that we've talked about plenty of times is Louis Varland, right? Now, I don't think there's any plans to move Louis Varland to the bullpen. I think everybody agrees Louis Varland, they need that depth in the starting rotation, but he's an option down there as well, right? You could also take a look at somebody like a Randy Dobnik to go up. I can't imagine that you'd want to look too closely at that, but that would be something.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, they don't really have an obvious, this guy's got to get a shot type of guy, which doesn't mean you can't give a shot to a guy who can find success. I mean, we're not asking for someone to replace Duran in the closer role. We're more asking for someone who can, if it's a 3-2 game in the 6th inning and there's some righties
get
up
through the 6th inning,
especially, not having to turn to Funderburk or Thielbar or Okert or whatever lefty versus righty situations. We'll see about that. I mean, obviously if Brock Stewart can come back relatively soon, I don't know. We'll find out more about that tonight. It's certainly, it's already been longer than they expected it to be, which was the case with him last year too.
That's right.
And he hasn't even, I don't think, started throwing, although we'll get an update on that tonight. So before we talk about the rotation, let's talk about our next couple of sponsors. BetterHelp. The idea with BetterHelp is if you've been thinking, I like to talk to someone about fill in the blank thing I'm not happy with.
That's right.
Or thing that's
some
upsetting
kind of
me.
Therapy, right?
And you maybe wake up on a day and you think, today's the day. And then you realize
it'd be hard just to decide you want to talk to somebody about it.
But then even when you do decide that, which is like half the battle, the steps you have to take or the hoops you have to jump through from an insurance standpoint, and you have to go book something, and then how do I know if a therapist is someone I want to go see? All this stuff.
When are they available?
That can push you off and make you go, you know what? Today's not the day.
Right.
And then you're back to where you started. With BetterHelp, they can set you up with a real licensed therapist geared toward whatever you're looking to talk to someone about within days, like 2 or 3 days usually. And they can tailor the entire experience to what you're comfortable with. So if you want to do a video chat, you can do a video chat. If you don't want to be on camera, you can do a phone call. If you're like me and you don't like doing phone calls, you can just type back and forth like you're texting. Right. They can tailor it for whatever kind of your comfort level is with that. And if you want to get it off your chest with BetterHelp, you can visit betterhelp.com/Gleeman. You get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com/Gleeman.
We're also heading into summer here. That means things like road trips. It means lots of activities, going to family events. It means going to kids' sporting events. It means going camping. A lot of times where you're trying to find a way to go and eat on the run, right? And one of the things I would recommend that you take a look at is Chomps Meat Sticks.
Chomps. Chomps, I can tell you that these are in the Twins clubhouse.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm
that's
saying
right.
anything out of school there.
That is correct.
They have a whole cart of like snacks, basically. Some
because they're good. They're high protein. Generally, they're not super fattening.
Yeah,
they are, and they're super convenient. Easy way to kind of load up with protein and get the rumblies and your tumblies to stop without eating a bag of potato chips.
Yeah, zero sugar, bunch of protein, low carb. They had a whole bunch of flavors. They sent us like a variety pack a little while back, and it's all kinds of different flavors, some spicy
beef,
stuff,
venison, all kinds of stuff. Right.
And if you go to Chomps right now, they're offering our listeners 20% off their first order, and they'll give you free shipping when you go to chomps.com/Gleeman. That's Chomps. CHOMPS, chomps.com/Gleeman to see all the flavor options and get 20% off your first order plus that free shipping. That's CHOMPS.com/Gleeman. And don't forget to use our Gleeman as a code.
That's right.
So they know we sang. All right. Rotation wise, Simeon Woods Richardson gets pulled. Was it 1 out before 5 innings?
Yeah.
And I know that infuriates people over 90 years old or whatever.
The Nationals broadcasters were talking about it. I was listening to the radio. I mean, not derogatory way. It's the top of the 4th inning. They've got a lefty warming up in the bullpen.
Right.
First 2 guys are right-handers. I bet you we see Okert in the bottom of the 5th.
But if that had been any other inning,
right,
other than the 5th, because
it would have made perfect sense.
the fifth has this magical connotation to it that's like what you need to complete to get a win, which is of course silly, and also nobody cares at this point about individual pitcher wins. The goal is to win a game, not to get a specific pitcher credit for the win. But yeah, I mean, he had faced the lineup twice already. He would be facing the top a third time. There was a bunch of lefties that were due up. If that were the fourth inning or the sixth inning or the eighth inning, nobody would have ever questioned removing the perhaps tiring. He had also given up a couple long fly balls to the warning track. The tiring guy, right-hander, and bringing a lefty to face lefties. It's just that because he was 1 out away from this magical ability to get a win.
It's not like it would be in his first career win. He already has a career win.
But even if it would have, who cares? And it was a close game.
Yeah, which they won.
Right. It worked out. Yeah, but even if it didn't, it's not. You can't. If they'd have been up 8-3, maybe he gets a chance to actually complete that. But you can't have one pitch, or he walks a guy and then gives up a homer, and it's like that changes the entire game. So I had no problem with that. The Simeon Woods Richardson, I'm not going to tell you he's been dominant or anything. I mean, there's been stuff to like. He's done a good job throwing strikes. He's limited hard contact. He hasn't missed a ton of bats. I think he has a 2.57 ERA. Well, it doesn't take much in terms of in-depth analysis to realize he's probably pitched closer to a 4.57 ERA, something like that.
He's got a 3.17 FIP.
Yeah, but that's just because he hasn't given up any homers.
Well, that's okay.
Oh, right, but that ain't sustainable. I'll bet you the XFIP's a lot worse than that.
Could be.
Or expected ERA, whatever it is. But the results are the results. Like, that's different from trying to project what he's going to be the rest of the year or next year or 10 years from now. He's thrown strikes. He hasn't knocked around. He's gotten removed from some starts, I think, at good times in terms of kind of limiting the opportunity to blow up, which I think is smart with a rookie pitcher. And, just in terms of replacing Louis Varland was 0-4 with a 9.18 ERA. They lost all 4 of his starts.
Right.
Well, Simeon Woods Richardson has made 7 starts, and like I said, he has a 2.57 ERA, and they're 5-2 in his starts. And I don't know that he's been the driving force behind more than a couple of those 5 wins, but he hasn't had blow-ups, and that's the key. A lot of times, you just can't afford we saw it with Varland. You can't afford a guy giving up 6 runs in 3 innings or something like that, because you're going to lose those games 90-something% of the time. Right. And it's so much better to play it safe with a guy like Woods Richardson, ask him to get through the lineup twice, and then kind of go from there, mix and match a little bit. Because the goal with him, they'd love for him to go throw 7 shutout innings or whatever, but the goal from him is to get it to the bullpen halfway through the game or more, and in a spot to win. And he's done that, I would say, in 6 of the 7 starts, maybe all 7. I'd have to look. But that's the goal. And there's been a couple of legitimately very good outings in there. There's been a couple of outings where it's like, he kind of danced through the raindrops a little bit, but they got him out of trouble. He escaped. They removed him. They turned it over to the bullpen, and they won 5 out of 7. So when he's stepping into a rotation spot that lost all 4 and deservedly, because he had a 9-something ERA. That's been a massive change for them, where they've won 5 out of 7 in a spot where they were taking kind of near automatic L's the first 4 times through the rotation.
Yeah, I think we've got a pretty good sense of what our pitching looks like. Now that's barring injuries over the next 3-4 months, but what we've seen from our rotation is a lot of consistency. It's rare that you have a blow up like Ober had, a little bit last week. And
actually, Lopez is the one who's
right. Lopez actually has been a little weird, right? I don't know if you're going to get to this or not, but Paddock, outing was unbelievable,
and he's going very deep in a lot of these starts, which is surprising to me.
And a big part of that has been Simeon Woods Richardson, and now the fact that I did like that they ended up, kind of inserting Ober in between Paddock and Simeon Woods Richardson as sort of, here's the more reliable guy in between the 2 guys that we maybe are keeping a closer eye on. But the truth is that you haven't had to keep that close of an eye on.
Paddock has worked the deepest of anybody, basically, which is very surprising to me.
Right.
So we talked about SWR, Simeon Woods Richardson. Joe Ryan, through 10 starts this year, has a 3.15 ERA. He has 64 strikeouts and 9 walks.
Wow.
In 60 innings.
That's
and he's
great.
given up 7 homers in 60 innings, which is not amazing, but that's a rate at which if he continues to kind of give up 1 homer every 9 innings, or roughly 9 innings, he will thrive because that is his one weakness, like his big weakness. Right. And so if he's just sort of average at giving up homers, the rest of his game is much, much better than average. So he will thrive in that scenario. But what I will say with Joe Ryan, and we talked about this a little bit on the Patreon too, after his start against Washington, we recorded the next morning, I think. But, I looked up last year through 10 starts. He was even better.
Yeah, he was.
Last year through 10 starts, he had a 2.21 ERA with 70 strikeouts and 10 walks in 61 innings, so basically the same, and he had only given up 4 homers. And we saw what happened after that. It was right around this time, a little bit deeper into June, but he completely unraveled from a health standpoint, and then just from a performance. He gave up 1 million home runs. And in the back of my mind, I was like, I think he kind of got off to a similar start 2 years ago, too. So I looked those numbers up. In 2022, through 10 starts, he had a 3.00 ERA.
Okay.
Not quite as amazing, 52 to 16 strikeout to walk ratio in 54 innings. He was on a little bit shorter of a leash there. 6 home runs allowed in 54 innings. And then after that, he had a 3.90 ERA the rest of the season. Yeah. So the question with Joe Ryan is not, is Joe Ryan legitimately this good when he's rolling? Yes, he is. 3 years in a row, he started like this, essentially. He pounds the strike zone now. He gets swings and misses with the fastball, even though it's not overwhelming velocity.
Yep.
He gets far more strikeouts than anyone would ever project just watching him because he's got some uniqueness to the pitch characteristics and the delivery and all that. He just has excellent command. He's so capable of being a low 3 or even high 2 ERA type of pitcher with more than a strikeout per inning. He's really cut way back on the walks where he just doesn't walk people at this point. It's all just about consistency.
6.5 months,
right? And some of that, I guess, is from a health or durability standpoint. Some of it, I think, is mechanically. Some of it is just sort of remaining consistent, not tinkering negatively with pitches and stuff like that. But
it's funny because that's what Ober talked about in spring training about what the difference was for him last year was just the reason he was able to go so many innings and the reason he was able to stay. I mean, he did fade as well, but he talked about, how important it was to get on a routine and to have, the sort of discipline to do all the stuff you need to do in between starts to be able to do that. I'm not sure that that's necessarily Joe Ryan's problem. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to suggest that. What I am trying to say, you raised good points that he has done this before
3 years
June,
running, basically,
or through May and maybe sometimes through June.
Yep.
And now we've got to see what he can do over the second half of the year because it's important not just for the regular season and seeing if he can provide that kind of consistent. The same kind of consistent that we've seen throughout the rotation.
They got to get him into October like this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, right now he is pitching like a guy you would feel comfortable with in Game 2 of a playoff series. Of course,
Game 1 maybe right now.
Well, that's maybe more so with Pablo. Yeah.
I mean, what an amazing trade! Regardless of what happens over these next few months or whatever. I mean, they have him for 3 more years of team control after this. 2 months of a 41-year-old Nelson Cruz for Joe Ryan is going to go down as one of the great trades in Twins history. As unpopular as it may have been at the time, just trading Nelson Cruz in general. Yeah. But Nelson Cruz was like good but not great for the Rays and then would have been a free agent anyway and was basically cooked after that. They're going to end up getting 7 years basically out of Joe Ryan, 6.5 years of this out of Joe Ryan. And there's been more inconsistency than you want to see, but I mean, it's clear what type of upside he has if he can get it to click for 6 months instead of 2 or 3 months.
Right.
I mean, he's an all-star type of pitcher.
Sure.
He's still under team control. I mean, he has huge value and he's hugely important to them. Now, with that said, do not look up in terms of trading how the Yankees got Luis Gil. Don't look up how that happened. I don't know. He threw another gem. He's got like a 0-something ERA for the Yankees. And it's like, oh, they've developed another stud pitcher. Don't look up how that happened. Do you remember how that happened?
No, how did that happen?
Well, Luis Gil was signed by the Twins, I think out of the Dominican, and he was in their rookie ball.
That first baseman?
No.
So good. Keep going.
Worse. Well, not worse, but funnier. And he was in their, I think, complex league, like rookie ball, basically. He was like 17 or 18. And he had some arm problems. He had good stuff and everything, but the the Yankees had a 40-man roster crunch. This would have been in 2018, I want to say. Right. And the Twins got into something of a bidding war over Jake Cave because I just read an article from our Yankees writer, Chris Kirshner, who had the whole background on this, and they even had quotes from Falvey, which was interesting. And basically the story was that the Yankees had too many good guys. They were going to cut some guys from the 40-man roster. They sent out a list to teams, and they were like, here's a few names, and a whole bunch of teams were interested in Jake Cave, who at that time had a really good run at AAA. Okay. He was like 25-year-old outfielder. Sure. And the Twins were like, well, he's not going to make it to us on waivers, so let's just say we'll give him some rookie ball pitcher. Okay. And now the guy's going to make an all-star team, and he's 25-year-old.
Where's Cave now? He left the Phillies, I think.
He's still in the majors. Rockies, maybe?
I think Rockies was what I was going to remember, too.
That was Falvey's quote, was like, he said, give credit to the Yankees. They identified a teenager who had arm problems, and they got him healthy. He, by the way, has had Tommy John since that trade, so it wasn't exactly smooth sailing to get to this point. But Falvey's point was, Jake Cave had more of a career than anybody would have bet on in 2018. Right. He was sort of old for a prospect and had yet to even reach the majors and was at AAA. He's played every year since then, including over 1,000 at-bats for the Twins. Yeah. Now, the part of that was them giving him playing time, I think, past the point. But the other weird part of the Jake Cave thing is he also directly led to Lamont Wade being let go. Well, and now Lamont Wade leads the National League in on-base percentage and has been a pretty good role player for the Giants. So these seemingly little decisions where you go, hey, we need a backup outfielder. We like this guy, Jake Cave. And I would argue that the Twins were, quote unquote, right about Jake Cave. He was a major leaguer.
Sure.
And so they were right about him.
He had a career.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And the first couple years he was pretty solid for the Twins. After that, not so much. But, you go up, all right, we'll give you some rookie ball 17-year-old who's got some elbow problems. The majority of the time, the vast majority of that time, that pitcher's going to turn out to be nothing.
Of course.
And you're going to have a backup outfielder. But the problem with taking that approach is the 1 out of 20, when the pitcher does turn into something, you're going to look silly because you're going to be like, we gave up this dude for Jake Cave? Yeah. And then, the Lamont Wade part doesn't make it any better. But, yeah, I would encourage people
on the other hand, the trade now that brought Margot here, you wrote this week a little bit about a rookie or a prospect they got back in that trade. Rain Donkin, is that how you say it?
Who's looking pretty good.
Although good right now.
Noah Miller has hit a little bit more than they expected to, because that was the other part of that. And Margot has obviously been a bust, let's call him. But before talking about that, maybe, we still haven't really talked about the lineup. But the other thing I wanted to say about the Pablo Lopez, who's had a couple of rough outings here and has got like a 4.5 ERA. First of all, go back and look what his ERA was around this time last year, and it was in the 4s also. But I guess the opposite of what I was saying with Simeon Woods Richardson. Pablo Lopez expected ERA is 3.14. Pablo Lopez expected FIP is 3.07.
Okay.
I'm not saying he's pitched flawlessly or he's just been unlucky. He's given up some bombs that have really hurt him. Yep. The sweeper in general has just been hit much harder.
People are looking for that
than last year. Although it's still getting swings and misses and stuff, but when it gets hit, it's going a long way. But all of the kind of underlying metrics certainly suggest he's a guy who should have an ERA in the 3s, not the 4s at the very least. Now, he doesn't take back.
That was the same thing as last year too. At this,
yes, time. Although he eventually trended towards that. Right. That's kind of what I'm saying. Is this year, last year at this time, he also had an ERA in the 4s. I remember he had a bad outing against the White Sox and a couple other, and we were saying the same stuff, and people were like, BS. This guy's not a. Well, you got to
400.
Right. You got to let it play out a little bit. Lineup wise, like you said, it's very elusive to get a handle on what's going on here. The one thing that really strikes me though is Kepler continues to play great, but they're getting almost nothing else from left-handed hitters at this point. Now, part of that is, obviously they were counting on Wallner. He gets demoted because he was so terrible right away. Kirilloff starts hot for 2 weeks and has basically been in a 6-week slump. Yeah. Larnach, sort of similar, starts hot, goes into a pretty big funk now. And then Julian hasn't really hit for about a month now after being pretty good early in the season or in the middle of the season. And so you add all that together, And other than Kepler, and I guess Willie Castro occasionally as a switch hitter, but Santana hasn't been great from the left side because that's his weaker side, and you've just gotten essentially nothing from Wallner, Kirilloff, a little something from Larnach, although not lately, and very little lately from Julian. Yeah. And so you add it all together, they're 12th in OPS out of 15 versus righties, and that's not how I saw things playing out coming into the season, because we thought
that's not the way it's been throughout.
Well, right, 20 years.
So, right.
We thought they got all these left-handed bats; they don't even have room for them all.
Right.
Well, it turns out they got room for somebody if they'd hit. Yeah. And then, meanwhile, Correa looks good since coming back. Buxton just hit 2 homers from the right side. Miranda looks pretty decent from the right side. And Castro's been much better from the right side, which has been different than the rest of his career. All of a sudden now the right side, especially if Royce Lewis comes back here within the next couple of weeks, all of a sudden the right side of the lineup looks to be a strength. I mean, they've vastly outperformed the left side of the lineup.
They're hitting left-handers, right.
Yeah, which is just weird. Correa, I know the raw numbers, he doesn't have huge RBI totals or anything like that, but 133 OPS plus right now, which means he's 33% better than the league as a whole. 2 years ago, his first year with the Twins, he was at 138, so he's basically at that level. And then his 2021, which was his last season in Houston, 131. Yeah. So a 130-something OPS plus is kind of Carlos Correa when he's going well. That's where he's at right now. And then last year, obviously, was 96, which means he was 4% below average. So he's been good. There isn't that much they can do, really, though, before Lewis comes back. Once Lewis comes back, you install him at third base, that frees up Miranda to maybe take some first base DH time away from, let's say, Kirilloff or Santana. It also frees up Willie Castro to be a left fielder, let's say, which could take playing time away from Larnach or Kirilloff, something like that. You maybe have slightly less use for the Farmers and the Margaux of the world at that point because you've added a right-handed bat. I don't know who specifically would have to go because somebody's going to get sent down.
Right.
I would probably argue it should be one of Larnach or Kirilloff at this point.
Yeah, we'll see which of them bounces out of things,
The other, but short of that, we'll probably get an update on Royce Lewis tonight too. So we'll have that Monday on the Patreon side.
And it'll be an important update because he was really supposed to be pushing himself this week. So
the domino from that will be interesting, but we might be weeks away from that still. We'll see. The other, what could they switch around? And this, the most obvious way to get an extra bat in the lineup is to stop using Jeffers half the time at DH and half the time at catcher and just use him, let's say, 2/3 of the time at catcher, in which case you're essentially replacing Vasquez for a couple of games a week with a DH bat, except who would the DH bat be? Right. Most of these guys are struggling anyway, Kirilloff, Larnach, etc.
That's right.
But, Vasquez at this point, I'm genuinely worried that he's cooked.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't be the first 30-something-year-old catcher to fall off a cliff in a hurry. We talked about it when they signed him.
He looks bad enough now that I can't help but wonder if there's something wrong with his back or something. There's just something going on in there that's, he's lost at.
Father Time is undefeated.
Maybe.
Especially with catchers. He's caught a lot of games a lot of years.
That's true. Camargo's doing okay in AAA.
He hasn't played for a month.
Hold on, I thought his numbers were good. I didn't know he hasn't been played. Has he been hurt?
Yeah.
Oh wow,
hamstring or something like that.
Jeez.
Might be only 3 weeks, but yeah, he hasn't played for a while. But that's not going to be something they're going to do anyway. The first step towards that would be playing Vasquez less. Right. Vasquez isn't going to go from playing 55% of the time to cut.
To being dropped. Yeah.
So you would need to at least scale back the playing time for Vasquez. And I know they value him defensively, and he's played well defensively.
Right.
And
they probably, with Jeffers, they could also say sort of he's doing really well. We don't want to screw this up.
He's not even really doing that well lately. Well, but yes, I just, at some point, it's great to have 2 catchers that you want in the lineup and be able to use Jeffers at DH. That's great. When compared to having Jeffers on the bench half the time. Except what that accomplishes is getting an extra bat in the lineup. But if playing Jeffers at DH is putting a 150 hitter in the lineup at catcher, you're canceling all that out anyway, and probably worse than that. And so you're basically now choosing.
And if you have Jeffers start two-thirds of the starts at the catcher, and that all that means is you get another few extra
couple times a week.
Alex Kirilloff
but those guys aren't necessarily hitting either. But yeah, I just at some point, I mean, we talked about this at this stage last year, although it wasn't as extreme. It's like at some point you got to scale back Vasquez's playing time. Like, I mean, he really hasn't hit since he got to the Twins.
Yeah.
I think this situation would be a lot different if he didn't have another year and $10 million left on the contract. I think that keeps you from kind of treating him as you would a normal slumping veteran like this.
Maybe.
Like, we haven't seen them cut a Margot or a Farmer or something, but I think the conversation with that will come up a lot sooner than it would with Vasquez, even though Vasquez has been by far the least effective hitter on the entire roster.
Well, and you don't really need to have too much of a conversation when you don't have a great other option right now.
But the conversation I would want to start with is, why is he started more games at catcher than Jeffers. Like, I don't think we need that at this point, unless you just truly believe he's such a massive upgrade defensively. I mean, we're getting to Drew Butera territory here, where like how much can the defense matter when a guy's hitting 130 or 140? He's been pretty, I don't know, past bad, I would say. So that's something to watch, I guess. And then I had one other thing from a lineup standpoint. Let's see. Oh, this I thought was kind of interesting. So by position, I looked at where they rank in the American League, out of all 30 major league teams.
Okay.
So, like, they're number 5 in OPS at shortstop because A, Correa's been good, but then B, when Correa was out, Willie Castro hit like 400.
Pretty good, yeah.
They're number 9 in center field, again, because Buxton's been okay, and Castro, when filling in, has been really good.
Sure.
They're also number 9 in right field, because of Kepler, has been excellent.
I'm sorry, is this in the American League? Or
out of 30.
Okay, all 30. Okay, gotcha.
So 5 at shortstop out of 30, 9 at center field and right field. The next best is 14th out of 30.
Second base.
Third base.
Third base.
Which has been Castro, Miranda,
right.
4 innings of Royce Lewis.
Okay.
15th in left field.
Wow.
Which is, I was surprised it's that good, actually.
I am too.
Because that's been a revolving door of not greatness. 17th at catcher, and you might go, well, that's not bad. They're getting average production at catcher. Well, Jeffers leads the league in OPS from catchers.
That's right.
So that tells you how bad Vasquez has been.
That's right.
That they go from half of them have
I
been the best.
expected catcher to be a lot higher because I think of catcher as
Jeffers.
Right.
19th at second base, which is not good. 20th at first base, and 27th at DH. They're 4th from last at DH, and they're also in the bottom third, basically, at first base. And so that's kind of what I'm getting at here, when it's like, they need to find something that can produce at the easiest spots to find something to produce, on paper.
Right.
And they've cycled through so many guys in those roles because of injuries and effectiveness or whatever, and they just had no one kind of grab hold, and which is why they've been using Jeffers at DH. I get it. But all that's doing is lowering your catcher production, basically. Right, so it's a trade-off. But I think until, why is this lineup so unpredictable? Well, injuries have played a part. But I think the lack of production over the last month or so from lefties, because you're going to face righties more than you face lefties. Sure. So if they're not getting any production from Julian and Larnach and Kirilloff and guys like that, you're just going to go through slumps because those guys are batting high up in the lineup. Those guys are coming up. And then I think the fact that the 3 spots, I mean, I guess left field's been average-ish, but 20th at first base and 27th at DH, if you were to combine those, I'm guessing they'd be about 25th.
Yeah, the good news is that those are the easiest places to actually find some production throughout the season, as a season goes.
Actually do it,
I mean, it's good to know, for the trade deadline. I'm sure that's the way most people are taking it. But I think, the other thing about it is that, they do have a number of young players that can fill those spots, and they're kind of waiting for some of them to actually get there, right? Maybe whether that's Larnach, whether that's Kirilloff, whether that's Miranda sliding over when Royce Lewis ends up taking back third base. Santana discovering the fountain of youth. I don't know exactly if that's.
He's about due for his 3 homers in 4 days
again, right? Yeah.
He's like Groundhog's Day.
Right. Yeah.
He pops out once a year.
Or, Wallner's, in that mix. I mean,
I wouldn't expect to see Wallner. Wallner's been one of the Saints' worst hitters.
I know.
That's
he's
disappointing.
I'm hoping that he finds whatever it is he's
I guess
looking for. Right?
What I'm saying is, because you're like, well, they have these young hitters. A lot of these guys ain't young hitters anymore.
Yeah.
And so at what point, I mean, so much of the focus.
Listen, the reason they are where they are is because of that, though, right? That doesn't. My point is that you're trying to get to the point where sometimes somebody's figuring it out for good in the second half of the season. Right?
But we're on, year 4 of that with some of these guys.
Sure.
And a lot of the focus will rightfully be on the Farmers and Margos and Vasquez's and the veterans because everybody wants to cut veterans. I mean, they're easy to cut.
Right.
And I'm not taking away from that. I think they're going to have to make some real tough decisions here with some of those guys, that uncomfortable decisions with some of these well-liked guys.
But it's also clear that you've got a bunch of guys who you thought were going to be top prospects who have experienced some initial success that the league has made adjustments to, and they need to make another adjustment now.
Like, how long can Trevor Larnach or Alex Kirilloff kind of, I don't want to say coast because that implies a negative connotation, but kind of ride on what you once thought they were going to be? At what point does that not matter? Like, at what point does it not matter that they were first-round picks? You know what I mean? Like, at what point doesn't it matter that you thought they were going to be good? I would argue, 26, 27, 4 or 5 years into the majors, that's the point. Now, you hate to give up on those guys and have them go thrive somewhere else, which there's an opportunity that they could do that. But
Brent Rooker.
That's I mean, he never even got a chance, really. But those are equally difficult decisions for different reasons. But, like, I think you got to start to do something somewhere with an eye towards what this lineup is going to look like in the second half. And maybe you don't want to do that until Royce Lewis comes back and you can get a better sense of what this looks like when everyone you wanted is actually there. Right. And I could see that, especially if they think he's going to be back in a week or two.
Because Miranda has actually, I mean, he's not left-handed, but he's somebody who could handle one of those two spots.
Yeah. But I don't know. There's just too many. And I mean, this is so simplistic. It's like, well, why is the lineup so inconsistent? Well, because half the guys are not hitting at all.
Right.
And so there's going to be days and times and matchups where it's like 4 lineup spots are filled by a guy who's hitting 150. It's like, well, yeah, you're not going to get much production out of that. I just think that there has to come a point where decisions are made on that. And I kind of wonder if Royce Lewis is, indirectly delaying that because they want to see, what does this lineup look like with Royce Lewis batting third? What does the whole kind of usage look like if he's playing third base, and that frees up Miranda, it frees up Castro to be used elsewhere, and then also somebody's going to have to get cut for him, which kind of maybe starts the ball rolling on that.
Also, just that we talked about it a little bit on Wednesday on the mailbag. We mentioned the Patreon. We get one more time. We often have a mailbag every week or every other week where we take questions, and the topic of Emmanuel Rodriguez in AA came up, who has been absolutely
2 more homers since we talked.
He's got a well over 1,000. He's a left-handed hitting outfielder. Yeah,
good outfielder too.
Yep, somebody who could you could plug into left field pretty nicely.
Well, he could
right here
back up center field.
Yeah,
too.
That's right. That might be yet another bat. We've also talked about one of the guys, the other 7 guys that you wrote about this week, Kersey.
Yeah, Deshaun Kersey at AAA. He's got. Let's see, he's got about a little over 900 OPS, hitting 290, draws some walks, hits a lot of doubles and triples, a few homers. He's got 15 steals. He's an excellent defensive player. If you were to play him in left field, let's say, he would be a Gold Glove caliber left fielder. He's a legit center fielder, would add speed to the lineup, but he's left-handed. Right. But as we're talking about, maybe that's actually what they need at this point. But
yeah, I mean, so there are options out there. One of the things I'm watching when I'm trying to watch Larnach and Kirilloff and watch their at-bats and watch their results as well, but also just watch their at-bats is, as you say, they're not coasting. They are struggling through the natural things that one struggles through at this age, at this level of experience through Major League Baseball. Now, at some point, you're either trending up or you're trending down. Both of them have been trending down recently, but maybe not so precipitously down that you are ready to say, okay, we need a hard reset back at AAA.
Yeah,
but I think if they do get to that point, then it'll be sort of like, well, maybe we take a look. But both of these guys are down. Maybe Kersey needs a shot. Maybe.
And my thing with Kersey especially would be, at the very least, he's going to be vastly superior defensively than either of those guys.
Sure.
I mean, Larnack's been basically a DH other than a couple of starts because of his foot, or his toe. But Kirilloff's not a good defender no matter where you're playing him. And so Kersey, at the very least, is going to save you runs defensively. I think people will be impressed if he gets an opportunity at some point with him defensively. He can steal. He's a 40 steal type of guy on the bases. The question with him is, can he hit? But I mean, he's shown the last 1.5, 2 years that he can hit. So yeah, I mean, there's Michael Hellman could be and also Brooks Lee, we should know.
That's true. Good point. Yeah.
Him and Walker Jenkins. We talked about this on the Patreon the other day when they started the rehabs, but they each had 2 hits yesterday playing for the Florida Complex League team, which is rookie ball. My assumption is they're going to be done with that rehab pretty quick, and Jenkins will go back to Fort Myers, which is low A, and just, resume normal season.
Sure.
Brooks Lee will go to AAA, join the Saints, and it's a little different scenario than it would have been had he been. I mean, if he'd have been healthy when the season started, he might have been called up for the second game of the season to replace Royce Lewis at third base. Yep. He certainly, if he hadn't been called up at that point, a couple weeks later when Correa went on the IL and Lewis was still out, he would have been called up to play third or short. Now, let's say he rehabs for another few games with rookie ball, and then he goes to AAA, St. Paul. At that point, Lewis might be relatively close to returning. And you'd like Brooks Lee, having not played since the middle of spring training, and also just barely played at AAA last year, you'd like him to put together a nice few weeks or a month or 6 weeks at AAA first. Well, by the time that could happen, Lewis hopefully will be entrenched again at third base. Correa hopefully will still be your shortstop every day. So it's like, well, where's the opportunity for Brooks Lee? I mean, the opportunity for Brooks Lee might be DH.
Might be.
Or you cycle him in with Julian at second.
Yeah,
you give Royce Lewis some second base. Well, I mean, you could basically treat it as 4 infielders for 3 spots. Right. Third base, shortstop, second base. Correa takes a day off from shortstop and plays DH. Royce Lewis, giving him a day or 2 per week at DH instead of third base is not a bad idea given his injury history. And then you could do the same with Julian because of his defense. So, this is
I'm taking a look at
Julian way before the horse here.
And as you mentioned, Julian has been sort of hot and cold at various times. I just took a look. Since April 27th, he's got a 502 OPS.
Right.
Like we've mentioned Kirilloff and Larnack 12 times in the last 10 minutes as we're talking about things.
Agree.
Julian is fighting through those woods just like those two guys are.
What's weird about it though? Julian's helping them defensively.
Well, that's true.
I never would have said that. Eddie Julian is defensive specialist. Hello, Chrissy.
Do we have a leaking roof?
We do not.
We do not. Oh, good. Thank
no
goodness.
Leaking roof. I mean, it's the same.
I just wanted to tell you we're all dry.
Okay. All right.
No leaking roof. Congratulations. That's good.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, here's the thing about a leaking roof, especially if a flat leaking roof. The top of this building is flat. As somebody who owned an apartment building that had a flat roof, you just never know if that's Tuesday night we got 3.5 inches of rain in like 10 hours. Today we got 1 inch of rain. Is it fixed for good or is it just
true?
Is it just a different condition? I don't know. We'll find out.
So yeah, Brooks Lee trending towards potentially being an option here, but I think that would not quite be as quick as maybe people would like. But if Royce Lewis is, again, we'll probably get an update on him tonight. But I mean, that would look. Nothing's gonna. We can talk about all these changes and Kersey and switching this guy to this and that, and Jeffers more at catcher. And I mean, these are small potatoes.
These are fiddling at the these are fiddling with dials, right?
To Royce Lewis being back hitting third and playing third base.
Yeah,
I mean, that is going to add a dimension to the lineup that no amount of tinkering elsewhere is going to do.
Right, yeah.
It just changes.
We had questions about Royce Lewis coming into this year too. Just FYI,
I mean, hell, you could bat him lead off if you wanted to. If you think Julian needs some, dial back on the
high leverage at bats.
On the leverage at bats. So, okay, I think that's about it. Oh, I wanted to share one last thing. Chrissy, you didn't hear because she's not on microphone. Hasn't learned that yet. We're only 13 years in. Hasn't learned if you're shouting things from the side, no one hears you. But my hip, she asked me about. The first time I went to the third time I went to the hip specialist. It's been like 10 now. I tweeted this, but it's funny to repeat it, I think. you get like your the notes from the visit, basically like what your chart says, and you can access that now, which I think is a good innovation.
Oh, for sure.
There was that Seinfeld episode where they tried to see their charts, and it was secret.
That's great.
And then the guy wrote like being difficult or something. So this goes to that. The first chart I saw after I got like I got a cortisone injection or something that didn't really take. It said, quote, doctor's notes for the visit. This is a well-developed, well-nourished, heavy-set male in no apparent distress. Which is like, you really haven't met me, Doc. Well-nourished and heavy-set, pretty accurate. The other parts of that. And so then I went a couple days ago. I went yesterday, actually, and had a much worse injection in a different area of the hip. And I was reading through the notes, and it was like, it wasn't really encouraging, talking about surgery and all that stuff. But then I came across this little note, and it said, visit summary at the end. It said, quote, Aaron is a pleasant 41-year-old male.
Wow.
And I thought, boy, that makes me question the entire medical industry. Like, nobody's ever said that to me. 41-year-old male's accurate, unfortunately.
Well, considering the procedure they were doing to you,
yeah,
and the fact that you didn't complain about said procedure as much as they probably, maybe that's what they were.
I was just thinking, like, if someone said to you, John, just start with a blank Google document, and as words come into your mind to describe Aaron Gleeman, you just type them. How many thousands of words, how many years would you have to spend at a Google document until you got to pleasant?
Do you think you can get that like notarized by somebody and then and show it to Dave St. Peter?
I'm pleasant. Yeah. This is like
just carry it into the clubhouse with you. Like
these doctors, summaries need a fact checker. No, it says here he's pleasant. We know that's not true. So what did you want to say there?
That's right, yeah.
Peasant? Do you think was he dressed poorly? You think he was a peasant?
Yeah, you're
a pheasant? Do you think he's
the athletics editors would never let that get back in your copy. We got to work on this adjective.
As Becky said,
let's workshop it. Oh, that's another one. Yeah,
she knows I ain't pleasant.
Did you show that to her? Does she believe it?
No,
no. Did she believe that when you said this?
I
is what
showed
they say.
her. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Her point was, this really goes to show how quickly they get you in and out of these doctor visits. Like how little attention to detail.
I would suggest the longer people know you,
right?
The first time they meet you, they might think
minutes.
he's a pleasant fellow.
Yeah.
And then third, fourth time, that's
right.
Not really at the top of their minds.
Yeah,
and by the 699th episode.
Yeah. Well, I'm going back in 2 weeks to the same doctor. But now I got a big head about it. So I'm like, this guy, I'm going to be like, Doc, you really liked me last time, huh? I'll be like, what? It's going to turn out like, unless someone like poops on the floor, they just write that for everyone because it's like code for like no issues or something.
Here's what I wonder. I wonder what the patient was like, the one just before you.
Yeah. It was
it's just like, oh, thank God.
It was Charles Manson. They're like, this guy's a gem compared to the last guy I saw. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, right. Who did he see? How did the first part of it was 1 o'clock when I went there? How did at noon?
Did Royce have the one just before you?
Yeah. Royce is a pleasant 80-year-old male, whatever he is. So yeah, I just thought that was worth sharing. Doctor's notes. I'll give you any updates on the next because Lord knows I'm going to be at the doctor. For a guy who didn't go to the doctor for like 10 years, God, I'm making up for lost time.
Yeah.
I've been to 4 different offices.
You know what? That's the way that works, though.
In 4 different cities. Well, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see.
It's a little like cutting payroll and stuff. You can get away with stuff for a while. There's going to be some long-term impacts, Mr. Gleeman, just to bring it around to the original topics.
And the attendance. Yeah. So, but I'll be at the ballpark tonight.
You're going to need some attendance in your future.
Wow. Yeah. The reading the notes.
They're not going to be as think you're as pleasant.
No. The reading the notes too, other than this stuff, which was funny, but a lot of the notes. First of all, it's just a lot of technical jargon that I'm like, I don't even know what they're talking about. But where it's like, patient has been advised about blah blah, and I'm like, not really, no. They basically go, you got any questions? No. I'm never. You know me. I wouldn't.
Right, of course not.
I haven't never sent a dish back in my life. I'm certain that I could be like, yes, doctor, I have 8 questions before you get started. But then it's like, patient has been made aware that this is not a solution to the problem. It is just a attempt to temporarily surgery may still be required in the near term. And I'm like, you didn't have to write that. Like now I'm looking at this and I'm like, what? So yeah, we'll see. Can be fun. You think of all the jokes you can make about a one-legged co-host.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I asked him about Ozempic because I'm like, I'd probably help to lose 100 pounds with my hip.
Sure.
So like, put me on Ozempic because I can't work out.
Right.
And I thought he was going to be like, you've only had this hip problem for like 6 months. Why weren't you working out before that? But doctors have bedside manners. So. Anyway,
we will be back.
We'll be back Monday morning.
Will we? Because it's Memorial Day.
Oh, well, that's up to you.
Okay, well, let's talk about it then.
Because I'm working Monday.
We'll be back Monday or Tuesday on Patreon, and we'll be back, again Friday for another free episode.
Late breaking transaction.
Okay.
Jorge Alcala called back up for Caleb Bosley.
Oh, great.
We kind of
okay, good.
talked about a little bit.
That was the one we were
rewind
most
to
interested in.
30 minutes ago, and I mentioned that.
That is
sort
correct.
of.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you to Brixworth and to Game Time and to BetterHelp and to
Chomps. This is why I'm pleasant. Because he just nodded at me like I knew what I was supposed to do.
Come on, go.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Gleeman